Hi, hello, and welcome to IAS Factor by LearnStroke. We are going for the current affairs discussions for 2024 UPSC Prelims examination. So everything is relating to that. And today's session is going to be an exclusive session on economy, Indian economy. So all the topics will be from Indian economy. And as you can see, all the topics that I'm putting here is coming from the Hindu, the Indian Express, and the Press Information Bureau (PIB). Okay, so that's it. And meanwhile, do subscribe to our channel IAS Factor by LearnStroke and download the LearnStroke IAS app from the Play Store to watch the classes and do check out the details for contacting or getting in touch. And yes, so what are the important topics that we are discussing today? Let's have an important discussion on the important topics of the day, long topics. So starting with what is the onion export, because that is something that we have to start from the important session here. What is the concept of onion export, and what is APMC? You can see, and what is GAP or good agriculture practice from agriculture also. So you need to know what are the concepts. And next is India's growth performance. We need to analyze India's growth analysis and also the real GDP growth rate of India. What is the real GDP and nominal GDP? And what is the global financial stability report of the IMF, and what are the concerns shared by that? And what is AIF or alternate investment funds, and what is the monetary policy committee, and what is the concept of gross fixed capital formation or GFCF, and what is private investment? What is the private investment trends that we need to know, and know about the India's direct tax collection statistics, and what is STT, the Securities Transaction Tax, which is in the news, and what is India's power consumption statistics, what are sovereign green bond or SGRB, the sovereign green bonds, and what is green taxonomy gap. And next is relating to the petroleum statistics and report. So, you need to know some statistics on petroleum. And last, we have, as usual, every class will have a map decoding session. So all this, economy can be a bit difficult for people, but I'm trying to put in the most important content here, which is going to be very easy for you. So all the concepts and some statistics can even appear as questions in the prelims exam. Okay, so without wasting much time, let's immediately go into the aspect of the onion exports and APMC and many other concepts in this regard. So onion export was actually put on hold due to various reasons. Even 40% extra taxation was actually reserved for this. And you should know that onion export was limited, and recently they have started it. And this concept, what is the concept of white onion? Because that is very important, because we know about the normal onion, because they are trading in the something called as white onion. So what is this concept of white onion? Let's find out all these concepts in this. So the government has now allowed export of 99,150 million tons of onion to 6 neighboring countries, which are our major exporting countries. You can check: Bangladesh, UAE, Bhutan, Bahrain, Mauritius, and Sri Lanka. These are our immediate neighbors where we are trading onions. So this was actually been there was a prohibition. I told you there was a small prohibition that was actually in place. That was actually created because there was no domestic availability of due to the lower kharif and rabi crops in 2023. So that is the reason why the export of onion was actually put on hold. Something that we should be knowing at this point of time. So now let's check the next important content as what is NCAEL. Please know this concept: National Cooperative Exports Limited, NCEL, is the agency for export of onion to these countries that we have discussed. So from now onwards, the approval of the NCEL or National Cooperative Export Limited is also important, and they'll be given at a negotiated rate at 100% advance payment basis. So this is also important. Please remember, National Cooperative Export Limited is the agency for export of onions. And you can see which take a small look at the small statistics. Maharashtra is the major supplier of onions sourced from NECL. So please understand Maharashtra, one of the leading producers of onion. And what about the concept of white onion? I told you, purely export oriented, production cost of white onion is higher than the onions, normal onions, due to the higher seed cost, adoption of good agriculture practice. I'll tell you what is GAP, and complaints to strict maximum residue limits, or the MRL, maximum residue limits. So keeping into all this thing, you will understand that white onions have you can see the price is higher than the normal onions. So please understand this in detail. So white onions, and let's understand, the union government has partially relaxed the indefinite ban of onion exports, and Gujarat is a major producer and exporter of white onions in India, particularly from districts like Bhavnagar and Amreli. So this has now been very clear. We have previously discussed about the onions, Maharashtra leading, but white onions, when you say Gujarat is a major exporter. And what about the onion cultivation in India? The onions are cultivated in India across 3 seasons. One is Kharif, next is late Kharif, and Rabi. So these 3 seasons, please know about this 3 season. They are normally asked in the examination. So please remember about this. The Rabi contributes significantly to overall production, with Maharashtra being the largest onion producing state, followed by Madhya Pradesh. So Maharashtra followed by Madhya Pradesh. You can actually have an idea in this. So I think this point is very clearly taken. And now let's move on to the next important one. And what about the statistics? India is the third largest exporter of onions globally after Netherlands and Mexico. So this is something that we should know. India is actually the third largest. See, such questions can be even asked in the prelims examination. Like India is the largest producer or exporter of onions internationally. No, it's the third largest. However, 40% export duty is like to impact major destinations. So I told you there was a 40% export duty. Now it's better, it's getting better off. India is exporting onion. So this is know about this details. And what is the concept of GAP, or good agriculture practice? In the context of agriculture, if you see GAP, it refers to a set of principles aimed at ensuring sustainable agriculture operations. So that is the key. GAP means good agriculture practice, means it's a set of principles which is creating sustainable agriculture operations. Like you can see environmental health, economic profitability, social and economic equity. And GAP guidelines cover a wide range of topics like soil management, water use, pest control, handling of inputs and outputs. All this is related components of good agriculture practice. Okay, so please remember this concept. And let's also discuss what you mean by APMC. This can also be asked as a prelims question. What is APMC? Because know about the APMC, because they means Agricultural Produce Market Committees. They are APMC. So what is APMC? It is just a platform. Very simple. APMC is a platform where farmers can sell their agricultural produce via auction. You can do an auction. So it's a platform where farmers can sell their products. So the goal is fair pricing. Farmers need to get fair pricing, and it is to prevent exploitation by larger buyers. So if you need to create a platform. So what is it? The APMC is responsible for providing necessary infrastructure within the market, like auction halls, weigh bridges, storage facility, and other amenity for smooth trading activities. So definitely APMC is creating an infrastructure like this. So definitely for this there will be some charges also. For this there will be definitely some charges on this basis. So we need to understand what are the charges relating to this. So APMC can collect market fees from the buyers, as well as licensing fee from the traders and shopkeepers within the market, which are used to maintain and improve market infrastructure. I told you there is a fee. So the APMC also plays a important role in resolving disputes between traders and farmers among traders. So this is very important because it's improved their income and reduced the role of the middlemen. So APMC's role is very, very important in this regard. We should really understand this. Okay, so that is regarding the onion, APMC, and a lot of other concepts. Moving on quickly to India's growth performance, because it's not only IMF, even you can take a look at the ADB Bank, the Asian Development Bank, or even United Nations, the UNTAD. You can see the UNTAD. Everybody has actually created different projections for India's growth rate. from actually starting from 6.5, 6.8, 7, 7.5. So there are different growth rate being projected. You can take a close look at this. Here we will discuss the concept of what is real GDP growth rate and nominal GDP growth rate also. You can see that India's growth rate 5, 6.5, it's actually, you can take a look at this. 2020 and 21 was it when it completely fell down to minus 5.8. And you can see that it rose to 9.7%. And in 2024-25, you can see that it is even pegged at 7.7 or 7.6%. You can see the yellow is the GDP growth estimate by the IMF, but we can see that it will actually grow above 7%, which is actually being showed in this. So let's understand what are the important other analysis regarding this. So India's financial ministry say that India will have a robust economic performance. So that is a good thing. India will have a robust economic performance. And what about World Economic Outlook? So IMF publishes this. This can even be a question. The World Economic Outlook, or WEO, is a report by IMF. World Economic Outlook revises India's real GDP growth rate for 24, and it says 7.8%. India will grow with 7.8% is not a small thing. So this is the World Economic Outlook. So this is what they say. And what are the other? You can take 7.8%. There is a chance that it will grow 7.8%, which is a good thing according to IMF. And now we need to understand what is this concept of real GDP growth rate and nominal GDP growth rate. So what is this real GDP and nominal GDP? Very important for the exam. So always understand the real GDP growth refers to the rate at which country's economy is growing in real terms. Very, very important. Please remember, real GDP growth rate means growth in real terms after adjusting inflation. You adjust inflation. You do not calculate inflation on this, because that is when you know the real terms. Inflation can come, decrease, increase. So you adjust inflation in real GDP. So this provides a health and vitality of an economy. And now let's look at the nominal GDP rate. So what is it? The nominal GDP measures the value of goods and services at current prices. That is the key word. Here the real GDP was real terms, adjusting for inflation. Nominal GDP measures current prices, which includes changes due to inflation. So real GDP, on the other hand, is adjusted to remove the effects of inflation. So in real, you remove the effects of inflation, allowing comparison across different time periods for more accurately. So this is one. Real is at constant current prices, nominal is at current prices, real GDP is at real, and real inflation is remove the effects of inflation. Always remember the word remove the effects of inflation. And now let's take a look at this. The nominal GDP is good for determining the country's market size under current prices. So it's under the current prices, while real GDP is better for economic analysis over time, allowing comparisons of economic growth and performance without the noise of inflation. Because you remove the impact of inflation in real, you can get a better economic analysis over a time. But nominal GDP is good for current prices. These are all questions that they can ask in the prelims exam. So changes in price level affect nominal GDP, but not real GDP. So when price level happens, it affects normally the nominal GDP at current prices, and not the real GDP, which is adjusted to remove the impact of inflation. It provides a real picture. So how is real GDP is calculated? By dividing nominal GDP by GDP deflator. You can say this is the nominal, and you divide it by the GDP deflator. So what is the GDP deflator? It is the ratio of nominal to real GDP in a base year. Please remember, GDP deflator is ratio of nominal to real GDP in a base year. That is GDP deflator. All this is also important for the exam. What is a GDP deflator? So you can see real GDP growth is calculated by comparing the real GDP from one to another. This growth shows how much the economy has grown. This we have already discussed. So various factors can affect real GDP growth rate, including consumer and business confidence, government spending, technological advancement, and external factors like. So all this can affect real GDP growth rate. The governments and central banks use real GDP growth to make economic decisions, including monetary and fiscal policy. So definitely real GDP holds an upper high criteria for that. And let's discuss some of the important statistics, so which will be easy for you. Let's understand the non-petroleum and non-gems and jewelry have demonstrated resilience, got a growth of 3%. So that is good. Non-petroleum, non-gems and jewelry merchandise has got 3% growth. And services exports, export of services, particularly software and business services, has expanded significantly. So this is also a good thing. So contributing to India's current account deficit improvement in the first 9 months. So when service improved, software exports improved, it has contributed to the betterment in improvement of current account deficit. And India experienced significant turnover in capital inflow. Very good capital inflow. Things which came into India's capital inflow is good, which has created high foreign reserves. Very important point in March. Telling you the latest statistics. High foreign exchange reserve is good. That is why we'll discuss. Foreign exchange reserves have reached levels sufficient to cover 11 months of projected imports and more than 100% of external debt. So for 11 months, our projected imports and 100% total external debt, foreign exchange reserves have reached a level that it can cover this. So it's also a good thing. And just like said, UNCTAD says India will grow at 6.5. IMF says we'll grow around 7.8%. And there are some people who believe that we'll grow around 6.8 and even 7% flat. So these are all expectations. Okay. And moving on to IMF concerns regarding global financial stability. There is another global financial stability. So what is IMF's concerns in this? Let's quickly understand. So let's understand. The International Monetary Fund has released global financial stability report. The World Economic Outlook is another thing that IMF, and this is global financial stability report is released by IMF. Please remember, this can also be a question for the prelims. And they have talked about various things. See, this talks about various things, and one of the most important thing is the investors' expectation. That means they've been driving up prices of financial assets like stocks, anticipating central banks to future interest rate cuts as inflation. So they are expecting, the investors across the world are expecting the central banks of the world to create interest rate cuts. They want to make the interest rate cut so that there will be more money in the economy. So you can see central banks typically lower interest rates to stimulate economic growth when inflation decreases. So you see that when there is an inflation like this, so the inflation is slowly decreasing. When the inflation is decreasing, you know that central banks like RBI or any other central bank will lower the interest rate. Why? To inject more money. They will lower the interest rate. That means they'll inject more money into the economy. So a lot of investors across the world are expecting this. So this is one thing which the report says. When inflation will come down, central bank will lower the interest rate, and this will inject more money into the economy. So this is what even the RBI does. And even you can take a close look at the next important thing is even the geopolitical tensions like West Asia, Ukraine could disrupt aggregate supply chains, leading to higher pressure and inflationary pressures. So investors all around the world believe that inflation will come down and central banks will cut down interest rates. And IMF warns that investors expecting central banks to inject more money into market may reconsider their optimism. So if this doesn't happen, this is difficult. However, you can see that if Western central banks indicate prolonged period of higher interest rates, if you see that the Western banks are keeping a higher interest rates, investors may withdraw funds from the emerging markets like India, leading to increased pressure on the Indian rupee. Very, very important. So if the European central banks are keeping the high interest rates, so they are, when the inflation is high, they'll keep the interest rates high. So if the interest rate is still very high, investors can take money out of India, and this, you know what will happen? This will have create an impact on the Indian rupee, and that is why the Indian rupee has already depreciated. Very, very important. So a severe outflow of capital could further depreciate rupee. So that means when the investors will pull up the money, there will be outflow of capital and depreciate rupee and have implications for India's financial systems. So in response, RBI may curb liquidity to raise interest rates, potentially slowing down the economy. So what happens is high interest rates, investors will pull out the money. If the investors will pull out the money from India, it will depreciate Indian currency. I'll tell you what happens means depreciating of Indian currency means what. So in this case, RBI after some time, there will be no other chance. RBI will again raise the interest rate. So this will slow down the economy. That is one thing that you have to understand. So you can understand what happens when rupee depreciates. So this means it needs more rupees to buy a single US dollar. That means imagine that you can take a look at this. Say imagine if it take 80 rupees to buy $1. You can say it take $1. You can buy $1 with just 80 rupees. So it takes more rupees. It will take 88. When it reaches to 88 or 90, what will happen is you'll need more Indian rupee to buy $1. So this is what is big. The depreciation reflects the value of Indian rupee relative to, this is a decrease in the value of Indian rupee related to the US dollar. So this situation will happen if the global economy is going like this, and we do not want that. So this is one big insight IMF is telling us. Okay, so please remember, this can even be a question. Rupee depreciation means we need more Indian rupee to buy a dollar. So this is not good for the economy. Ultimately, this is never good for the economy. And the IMF also talks about what is private credit market. So what is this concept of private credit market? See, such questions can also appear in the examination when you don't have any idea what are private credit market. See, IMF reports highlight concerns about the growing unregulated private credit market. See, these are non-bank financial institution which is lending to corporate borrowers, not the banking. They are the private people, the private credit market. So the private people who are lending to corporate borrowers. This is not. It's a private. It's called private credit market. They are unregulated private credit market who are giving money to corporate borrowers, which is not bank. So it has grown to let's just take a look at $2.1 trillion last year, with institutional investors such as pension fund and insurance companies participating. So these are unregulated private credit market. So let's understand. Let's take an example of alternative investment funds, or AIF. The next important topic is what is alternate investment funds. So India has witnessed the emergence of a small private credit market, particularly with the rise of alternative investment funds, or AIF. You can see that these funds cater to high risk borrowers underserved by traditional banking institution and non-banking financial companies after investing. So they can invest in which are underserved, where traditional banking and NBFCs are not investing. These people can come and invest. So investment through AIF in India have increased significantly, indicating growing importance of this. Regulators like RBI, the SEBI have increased scrutiny over these funds to mitigated risk. So definitely, banking institution and NBFCs are not investing. Where they do not invest, these people can come and invest. So RBI and SEBI have raised the voice. So now let's understand. Next important concept is what are AIF? You can see three categories. One is infrastructure fund, venture capital fund, angel fund, social venture fund. So something that you see that startups are getting. Second is private equity fund, real estate fund, debt fund, fund of funds. And the third category is hedge fund and pipe fund. So what are alternate investment funds? Let's quickly understand this topic. So AIF refers to funds, number one, funds established or incorporated in India. Point number two, that are privately pooled. Very important. They are privately pooled investment vehicles which collects funds from one sophisticated investors, whether Indian or foreign, for investing in accordance with defined investment for benefits of investment. So imagine that this is a small pool. There are people, sophisticated investors, whether Indian or foreign investors, they have all pooled their fund inside this. So this is alternative investment funds. They have pooled their investment, and for this investment that they have pooled, they will invest it somewhere. They will invest it somewhere called A, and they want returns to go back. They need higher returns for this. When they have invested, they need expectation, they need returns. So this is alternative investment fund in India are regulated by SEBI, And SEBI introduced the SEBI Alternative Investment Funds Regulation in 2012, which provided a framework for the registration, operation, and regulation of AIF. So SEBI has created a strong control over this. Very important. This is also a question. SEBI controls this. SEBI is controlling AIF in India. So this is private. So what is the three categories? Let's understand three category. Number one, they can invest in startup companies, early stage ventures, social ventures, small and medium sized enterprises, SME, infrastructure and other sector which are considered economically and socially viable by government or regulators. Their funds may receive incentive or concession from government or regulators. So they can invest in startup and other things. Category number one, AIF. And second category, these funds do not receive specific incentive or concession from the government or regulators. They do not get any specific incentive or concession. They can invest anywhere in the combination but cannot engage in borrowing. So they can invest anywhere in a combination, but they do not get support from government or regulators, but they cannot engage in borrowing. They cannot do borrowing or issue debt except to meet day-to-day operation things. So they can engage in borrowing and debt only for meeting day-to-day operational requirement. So what are the examples of this? Please understand private equity funds and debt funds. Please remember category 2, private equity funds and debt funds. Category 1 is startup companies. So what is category number 3? These funds may employ diverse or complex trading strategies and may invest in listed in unlisted derivatives. They can invest the money in unlisted derivatives. So you can invest, what are they? Hedge funds and funds which trade to make a short term. So you can have an example very simply. They are hedge funds. They invest in derivatives. So immediately understand category number 1. Very simple. If category number 1, they can invest in startup, medium SMEs, infrastructure or small social ventures. They get support. Second category, they do not get any support, regulator support, but they can invest in anywhere but cannot borrow or issue debt unless for day-to-day activities. And category number 3, they can invest in derivatives, and the most important are hedge funds. And previously the important examples were private equity funds and debt funds. So that is the AIF category that I've given you. So what is AIF? Typically they attract high net worth individuals, institutional investors and other sophisticated investors who are capable of understanding and evaluated risk. So definitely you get higher investors, high net worth individuals are investing in this. So this definitely gives an opportunity to diverse their investments, and definitely they get higher returns also. So investing in all this will give higher returns also. So that is all about AIF. And yeah, this is also very simple. I've already told, they get higher returns. So that's the important point. So that is all about AIF. And moving on to the next important concept is what is Monetary Policy Committee. You know that this is related to the Reserve Bank of India. This can also be a question. Let's understand. Monetary Policy Committee, or MPC, is a key component of RBI. It's actually targeted to countries' monetary policy by managing inflation while keeping an eye on economic growth. So these are all the important. They can manage inflation. They can keep an eye on economic growth. So this is established under Amended Reserve Bank of India Act 1934 through Finance Act of 2016. So please remember Amended Act of RBI 1934 and Finance Act of 2016, bringing transparency and accountability of setting the monetary policy of India. So now we need to create more transparency in that. So let's see how it works. It consists of 6 members, very important. 3 of these members come from RBI, including the governor, who serves as the chairperson, a deputy governor in charge of monetary policy, and 1 officer of the bank nominated by RBI Central Board. Please remember, governor, a chairperson, deputy governor in charge of monetary policy, and 1 officer of the bank maintained by RBI Central Board. And the other 3 members are appointed by the central government, bringing in external expertise to committee. So these are brought by the central government. So now they take people from academic institutions known for their work in economics and finance. If you're really good at it, you can also be a part of the Monetary Policy Committee. Very important. And the committee meets at least 4 times a year and is responsible for determining the benchmark policy interest rate. What is the benchmark policy interest rate? This is nothing but the repo rate. So it is ultimately determined what is the repo rate with an aim to maintain inflation with a target range set by the government. The inflation target is currently set at 4% with a tolerance band of 2 to 6%. Decisions made during these meetings are published to ensure. So 4% interest band is already set inflation target, but it's definitely inflation can go up to 5 plus 2%. It can go up to 4.5, now 5.5. So target is set. So definitely benchmark policy interest rate, repo rate. Please remember this in this context. So MPC's decisions are crucial for economic stability, impacting everything from consumer prices. So it is very important for, and please remember MPC's decision is important, and keep MPC's. I told you they meet at least four times in a year. The quorum of the meeting of the MPC is 4 members. 6 members are needed. 6 members are there. The quorum means 4 members. Each member of MPC has 1 vote, and in the event of an equality of votes, the governor has a second or a casting vote. Very important. If there is a tie, every member of MPC, 6 members have vote. In case there is a tie, the governor has a casting vote. Has got a second or a casting vote. Each member of the Monetary Policy Committee writes a statement specifying the reasons for voting in favor or against the proposed resolution. So they have to write this also. So this is about the Monetary Policy Committee. Please remember about this. And next important topic is what is the concept of gross fixed capital formation, or GFCF, and private investment trends. So what is the concept of gross capital formation? Let's quickly understand what is gross capital formation. You must have heard this in economics. So let's quickly understand. So the gross capital formation is a macroeconomic concept used to measure what? The total value of a country's new fixed assets purchased. Very, very important. New fixed assets purchased or created during a given period minus disposals. Let me make it more clear. It reflects investments by the business sector and the government in what? See, whatever you have created in fixed assets like buildings, machinery, equipment, infrastructure that are used in the production process. So GFCF is a critical indicator of economic growth, showing how much of the new value added to the economy is being invested rather than consumed. So how much is invested rather than being consumed? So where do you invest? Government in fixed assets such as building, machinery, equipment, infrastructure, etc. is to be noted here. So that is something that we have to understand here. GFCF. So it typically includes spending on physical assets like land improvements, plant, machinery, equipment, purchase, construction of roads, railways, schools, offices, hospitals, private residential dwellings, commercial and industrial buildings. So all this can be asked in the prelims also. So what is this GFCF? So investment in intangible assets such as software and intellectual property rights are not counted in GFCF. However, expenditure on major improvements or renovation that extend the life of an asset is included. So whatever improvement or renovation to extend the life of an asset. So asset means tangible assets, not intangible assets are not counted in. Very important. So this is what is called gross fixed capital formation. So whatever investment. So this, what is private? So what is GFCF means? What is private GFCF? So GFCF is a component of GDP under the expenditure method. It's a part of capital formation. So please understand, even the GDP calculation under the expenditure method, GFCF is also a part. So what is private GFCF? So private GFCF refers investments in fixed assets like building, machinery, equipment made by the private sector, not by the government or public authorities. That is the key authority. So whatever investments in assets created by the private sector and not the government or public sector, that is private GFCF. So made by private enterprises. So it does not include government entities or private corporations. So that is private. So GFCF private means anything investments in assets. And let's understand something called as private investment. Private investment is very important in India. It's witnessed a significant uptick after reforms in late 1980s, reflecting improved private sector confidence. So previously, you know that only government was investing continuously. So private investment by private sector is also very important. So public investment surpassed private investment in the early 1980s, but began declining post liberalization, with private investment leading the fixed capital formation. Previously government was leading it. Anything investment was by government, and after some time, after 80s, after 1990s, private investment slowly surpassed the government investment, because that is why development is happening. So the growth trajectory of private investment peaked around 2007, reaching 27% of GDP, but has since declined, hitting in 19. So after 2007-8, recently the private investment has also come down. In 2020-21, it has come down from 27% to 19%. So you should know why that has come down. Low private consumption expenditure has been cited as primary reason for sluggish private investment. So definitely in the last 20 years, private investment was very high in 2007-8, but private investment is slowly decreasing. And low private consumption expenditure is one of the reason why private investment has come down. What do you mean by low private consumption expenditure? I'll explain it. What is low private consumption expenditure? Let's explain. So the primary cost of low private investment is lower economic growth. So private investors are often viewed as better allocators of capital. So let's understand what is low private consumption expenditure means. What? One thing we understood, the private investment has increased in 27% of GDP in 2007-8, but it decreased in 19.6 in 2021. So the reason is low private consumption expenditure, as the government says. What is that? Low private consumption expenditure refers to a situation where households are spending less on goods and services. This means people are not spending in goods and services, and reduced consumption can suggest an economic slowdown where individuals feels less confident about their financial future and they rather save. People are not spending in goods and services. That is low consumption expenditure. They would love to save because they feel saving is better for future. They are saving more to the uncertainty about the future, and maybe reduction in disposable income, possibly due to job losses, lower wage, or higher taxes. This means lower expenditure. Consumption expenditure is less. They don't get much money. They are losing the jobs, etc. So this is why private consumption is very important. So this, please understand the important concepts that I told you. These can be asked in the examination. These are things that we normally don't learn in the books. So private investment, and what is private investment, and what is GFCF, and what is private GFCF, all is important. And now let's quickly move on to the other important topics. Let's get our statistics correct. 2023-24, what is direct tax collection? What is direct tax collection? Let's understand. The direct tax collection refers to revenue that a government receives from taxes levied directly on the income of wealth of individuals and organizations. So this is direct tax collection. That means tax levied directly on the income and wealth of individuals. Indirect taxes means which are levied on goods and services and are paid indirectly by consumers, but direct taxes are paid directly to government by the taxpayers. So that is direct tax. Next is indirect tax. So this is different. Now let's understand what are some of the income tax. Definitely levied on the income earned by the individuals. And you know what is income tax. Corporate tax, a type of tax that is specifically levied on the profits earned by the companies. So that is corporate tax. And what is capital gains tax? It's charged on the profit that is realized from the sale of a non-inventory asset that was higher in value than the purchase price. The most common capital gains are realized from sale of stocks, bonds, or let's see, precious metals, real estate, and property. So this is capital gains tax charged on the profit that is realized from the sale, like bond stocks. So these are capital gains tax. All these are direct tax collection. Estate tax or inheritance tax. Individual's estate or the value of their money and property at the time of their death. That is excise tax, estate tax. Property tax, a local tax imposed on real estate owned by individuals. Wealth tax levied on the total value of personal assets, including bank deposit, real estate assets, and insurance trust. All these are examples of direct tax collection. Okay, now let's check the important statistics quickly. So India's net direct tax collection has increased by 17.7%. Good. So that means people have contributed to tax. The personal income taxes witnessed a noble increase, contributing to 53% of the total tax collection. So that is something that we have to note. So personal income tax, the PIT witnessed notable increase, while the share of corporate tax dipped. So there is a small dip. Income tax is increasing. Total net direct tax is high. Personal income tax is increased, but corporate tax has dipped. And net, you can also see, was driven by PIT, the personal income tax, and STT. The surge in net tax collection in the final fortnight was due to driven by STT. What is securities and transaction tax, or STT? What do you mean by XTT? Let's understand what is STT. Securities transaction tax. They can ask this question in the prelims. What is the security transaction tax? So securities transaction tax is a tax levied on the purchase or sale of securities that are listed on the stock exchange of India. If your tax levied on purchase of securities listed on the stock exchange, this is applicable of stocks, derivatives, and other securities when they are traded through an Indian stock exchange. So whatever is listed, there is a tax on stock exchange. STT is intended to reduce tax avoidance. So definitely that is STT. So this is charged on the purchase and sale of equities, derivatives, and equity-oriented mutual funds and equity-oriented exchange-traded funds (ETF). And the rate of STT varies depending on the type of security. And the tax is collected by the stock exchange through the brokers at the time of transaction. So please understand, STT is actually the securities transaction tax listed on the stock exchange of India. When you trade on that, there is a STT involved in this. So, and you can see that the gross corporate tax collection increase, the gross corporate tax collection increase, and the gross PIT and STT collections grew, that they also grew, and the provisional direct tax collections exceeded the budget estimate. So what was estimated, it is more than that in 2023. Tax refunds have increased. So tax refunds have increased. All these are important statistics that you should be knowing for the prelims examination. Sometimes this is in the news, so definitely that can be asked in the exam also. Okay, so that is all regarding this. And next, going for the next important topic. Next is India's power consumption data. Let's understand quick power consumption data, because that is also important relating to energy. India's power consumption increased by nearly 10% year on year to 70.6 billion units in April 24. So definitely India's power consumption has increased 10%. So this, see, such statistics can even be asked. Power consumption has increased 10%. Good. And what is expert attribute the growth in power consumption? Like reduced need for cooling appliances due to rains. Reduced need for cooling appliances means a lot of people have not used AC as rains were approaching. And additionally, there is a trend of consumers adopting more energy intensive appliances and gadgets similar to patterns observed in developed countries. So that is 10%. So people, the increase in electricity consumption in the transport sector, including electric buses, cars, rickshaw, railway, has contributed to changing consumption patterns and higher capita usage. So transportation sector, the shift indicates a broader trend towards electrification and clean energy. So definitely electricity, we need a more cleaner energy sources in the transportation sector. So electricity is widely used in all this. So that is regarding that. And the next important topic is, what is sovereign green bond and green taxonomy gap? These are economy topics that they can ask. What is sovereign green bonds? So please check out. Let's understand what is it. Sovereign green bonds are a type of government bond. Point number one, specifically issued. Point number two, fund environmentally friendly projects. Very, very important. So in order to create fund environmentally friendly projects, so imagine that this is a project called A. It is an environment friendly project. So in order to develop this project called A, we need funding. For that, there is a bond which is called a sovereign green bond which is issued. So that will create the development of project called A on sustainable green project. So these bonds are a way for governments to raise capital. So this is used to raise capital For what? For projects that address climate change, environmental sustainability, renewable energy, energy efficiency, pollution prevention, sustainable water management, and other similar initiative. If the project called A, if the project called A is belonging to any of these categories, definitely the government can raise capital through sovereign green bond. Very simply, this is sovereign green bond. Simple. This is so funds raised from these bonds are strictly allocated for green projects. So this ensures that investment contributes directly to environment sustainability. So it's directly for green projects. Issuers of green bond typically report on how funds are being used and the environmental impacts achieved, ensuring transparency. So while they are backed by full faith and credit of the issuing government, so this is clean, and this is what you mean by sovereign. So by issuing green bonds, government not only finance green projects but also help in developing the green bond market, setting benchmark for corporate issuers and demonstrating commitment for sustainable practice. So definitely this is a higher step. And green bonds attract a diverse group of investment, including traditional investors looking for safe government bonds and socially responsible investors. So if you are looking for a safe investment, you can actually go for this. And if you believe that if your investment should go for a environmental sustainability, this is really good, the sovereign green bonds. So RBI's approval for foreign institutional investors. So RBI has approved FIIs, the foreign institutional investors, to invest in sovereign green bonds. So definitely they can get a better returns because it is a government thing, and you can also contribute to green development. So now RBI has approved FII to invest in sovereign green bonds. So what are the benefits of allowing FIIs in green sec? So widening the avenue for government borrowing. So you can widening the avenue, you can get more investments, more people can fund money involving FII. So more money from different places come. Comparison between conventional government sects in terms of interest rates and greenium. So definitely there will be a comparison between the government security and the sovereign green bond. So global encouragement for financial institution to have green investments. So we need to have green investments. Opportunities for FII to diversify green investments and green credentials in Indian market. If you need to have green credentials in Indian market, you can come forward in India. So what is green taxonomy gap? I'll simply understand what is green taxonomy gap. It generally refers to discrepancy or a gap in the classification systems used to define and categorize environmentally sustainable. So let's understand. It's green taxonomy is a gap or a discrepancy in the classification used to define which is environmental category or environmental sustainable activity. So I'll give you an example this year. I'll give you a more simple example to understand. See, different countries may have variable criteria, different criteria of what is green or sustainable. Some parts of the country, let's understand, there is a confusion among investors which is green or what is sustainable. This is different from different countries. So understand, one country's green taxonomy might consider certain type of forest activities sustainable. See, imagine that you can forest called A, conservation of forest called A is green in one country. Okay, one country. But for another country called B, this conservation or utilization of A is prevented in B. So what is A is green in one country, but in another country called B, this is not green. So for example, green taxonomy might consider certain types of forest activity sustainable, while another might exclude them due to different environmental standards and priorities. So that is what is basically said green taxonomy gap. So it's a classification, it's a gap in the classification used to define and categorize environmental sustainable activities. That is what is green taxonomy gap. So I think this is clear. So please understand, this is the gap that we are talking about. So lack of green taxonomy in RBI's initial issuance of now we need more green taxonomy in this. Importance of identifying new green projects with credible audit trails and high impact for optimal deployment needs to be done. So that is all about the green sovereign thing. And now let's, before we end this session, Last is the petroleum statistics that we need to understand for the prelims examination. What are the important? India's crude oil import dropped. So the crude oil import has dropped. That means that has decreased by 16%. 16%. So the general crude oil import has dropped. India is less importing now. So the crude oil import has dropped. Whenever there is a drop in the import, it's a good thing. More exports is good for the country. And indicating import dependency increased to 87%, indicating a higher reliance on overseas supply. But the import dependency is increased. The crude oil import dropped, but the dependency is high because India needs to have more sources. We are depending a lot of things on the overseas suppliers. India imported 30.9 billion cubic meters of LNG at a cost. So all these values are not important. Trend is important. So India is importing a large number. It's at a cost of 13.3 billion, down from 17 spent on this. So India's LNG imports is actually shown here. The decrease in LNG import cost was attributed to lower energy prices. So India imported 30.9 of what prices? 13.3 billion in 23 from 17.7 in spent in 22. So 22 they spent $17.1 billion. Now they are spending only $13.3 billion. So LNG import, the cost has come down. The decrease in LNG import cost was attributed to lower energy prices. So LNG prices has, India's cost of LNG has decreased. Import dependency has increased. The total crude oil import has dropped. That is the statistics. And the net oil and gas import bill stood at 121.6 billion, a decrease from US. So the import bill is 121.6 billion. That means there is a decrease from 144 to 121. It has decreased. So the net oil and gas import has again decreased. That is why we said in the previous slide that crude oil import has dropped. And India's fuel consumption rose by 4.6% to a record. So this does not mean imports have cut down, but India's fuel consumption has rose by 4.6%. India's fuel consumption has gone. Petroleum imports accounted for 25.1%, and please remember this statistics. Petroleum exports constituted 12% of the country's gross exports in 23 compared to 14% in the previous year. So you can see petroleum exports constitute 12% of the exports. The gross exports of India, 12% is from petroleum, and that was previously 14, and now it has come down to 12%. So these are important. India's import dependency rose, highlighting the country's reliance on overseas suppliers. This is one point that I told you. Even though the bills have dropped and down, you can imagine that the dependence on overseas suppliers is very high. India depends everything on, most of the cases, crude oil. India is depending on the overseas suppliers. So lower international rates and reduced LNG import costs contributed to a decline in the net oil. So this we already discussed. There is international price has gone down some areas, and LNG import cost is also low. India's surplus refining capacity facilitated petroleum products offsetting. So all these are important points that I wanted to tell you. So please take a close look at the important statistics here before we end this. The crude oil import bill, 16% drop in import, and import dependency is high. Dependency on oil suppliers. The LNG cost is actually less compared to previous years, and you can see India's fuel consumption rate is also high, 4%. It's very high, and you can see that petroleum constitutes 12% of the total gross export. Such things can even be asked in the prelims examination as a statement. The gross petroleum contributes around 12% of this thing. So this is where you get statistics from. And now, before we end this session, important map decoding session. In the news, let's decode Syria. Syria, let's understand the borders of Syria. You can see Syria. Take a close look at this. Iraq is already bordering Syria very clearly, and you can see Jordan. Jordan is bordering this, and look at where Israel is, and look at this, Lebanon also joining this at this place. Lebanon has this, and definitely Turkey. Turkey also is bordering. So look at these places and let's understand this clearly. Which are the countries? You can see Turkey, Iraq, Jordan, Israel, and Lebanon to the west. So look at this, correct? Let's look at this more clearly. Iraq, Jordan, and maybe parts of Israel. You can mark this. Parts of Israel, Jordan, and definitely Lebanon and Turkey are bordering the states, the countries, a country of Syria. So get this: Turkey, Iraq, Jordan, Israel, and Lebanon. So definitely these are the countries. And the next is Iran. Iran is also in news in the last 1 year. So many times Iran is in the news. So understand Iran. Iran is a very big country. You can just take a look at this. Pakistan at one end. You can see Afghanistan at the other end, and definitely Turkmenistan at this point. And Iran, one side of the Iran, look at there is, you can have one entrance to Caspian Sea. Very important. You can have one entrance to Caspian Sea, and from Indian Ocean you can see close look at the Strait of Hormuz. The Strait of Hormuz is also important from Indian Ocean. It connecting to India. It connects all these places of Gujarat, Rajasthan, Bombay, Strait of Hormuz. And when you go into Strait of Hormuz, you can reach Qatar, and this is the Persian Gulf. And look at this, small parts of Kuwait and even Iraq borders this, and Armenia, Azerbaijan, and definitely Caspian Sea. So look at this. So let's take a close look at this. Turkey, Iraq, Armenia, Azerbaijan, Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, and Pakistan. So when we go this Pakistan, Afghanistan, Turkmenistan, Azerbaijan, Armenia. So look closely. And please do remember about the Strait of Hormuz, Indian Ocean to the Persian Gulf, and Caspian Sea on the other end. Near to Turkmenistan and Azerbaijan, you have opening to the Caspian Sea. Very important for knowing this world geography. Please have a close look at this. And definitely Iraq and Turkey, definitely at this point. Okay, so that was all about today's session. I hope it was a long session, so please do watch and get the important analysis of economy. So I'll come up with next session and I'll bring more session, more details, more current affairs topics for the 2024 examination. So stay tuned with IAS Factor by LearnStroke.